The morning was calm, and the lake water was shining under the soft sunlight. Birds circled above, and the sound of small waves touched the wooden dock that stood near the old cabin. The dock looked simple, but it was strong and wide, stretching a little way into the water. It belonged to a man named Daniel. Daniel had lived by the lake for a few years. He liked the peace, the fresh air, and the way the water carried stories of the past. His cabin was not big, but it was enough for him. He grew vegetables in his garden, fished in the lake, and sometimes helped his neighbors when they needed a hand. For Daniel, life here was simple, and the dock was part of that life. It was the place where he tied his small boat, where he sat to watch the sunset, and where he welcomed friends who visited by water. One summer morning, while Daniel was drinking tea on the porch, he heard the sound of a car engine. A black SUV stopped near his cabin, and 3 people stepped out. They wore matching shirts with the logo of the Homeowners Association, or HOA. Daniel knew about the HOA, but he had never spoken much with them. He preferred to mind his own land and let others do the same. The tallest of the 3, a man named Paul, walked forward with a folder in his hand. His expression was firm, as if he was already preparing for an argument. "Good morning," Paul said. "We are here regarding your dock." Daniel placed his cup on the table and stood up slowly. He nodded politely but did not invite them in. "What about my dock?" he asked. Paul opened the folder and pulled out some papers. "According to our records, this dock is not authorized. It does not meet the guidelines set by the association. You will need to remove it within 2 weeks, or the HOA will take action." Daniel looked at the dock, then back at the men. He raised an eyebrow. "Remove it? This dock has been here longer than I have. The old maps show it clearly. I maintain it myself. It is safe and useful." The woman standing beside Paul crossed her arms. Her name was Clara, and her tone was sharp. "That doesn't matter. The association controls this area. You cannot just build or keep structures without approval. Rules are rules." Daniel stayed calm, but his voice was steady. "This is my land. The dock rests on it. And as for the water, I think you should check your facts before making demands." Paul frowned. "We already did. The water is common property managed by the association. Your dock sits on shared access. You don't own that water." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then Daniel smiled, not with anger but with quiet confidence. He walked back into his cabin, opened a drawer, and returned with an old leather folder. Inside were several yellowed documents. He laid them gently on the porch table. "These," Daniel said, "are the original deeds of this land and the waterways around it. They date back more than a century. The previous owner gave them to me when I bought the cabin. You may want to read them carefully." Paul looked annoyed but picked up one of the papers. His eyes scanned the text, then widened slightly. He quickly passed it to Clara, who read the same lines and stiffened. The third man, who had remained quiet, leaned closer, and his mouth dropped open. Daniel spoke again. "The truth is simple. This dock is not illegal. In fact, these papers state that whoever owns this land controls the waterways connected to it. That means every stream, every small river, and every corner of this lake that falls within the county lines." The HOA members looked stunned. None of them had expected this. They thought they would scare Daniel into giving up his dock. Instead, they had uncovered something much larger. Paul tried to recover his voice. "That cannot be correct. The association has rules. Everyone must follow them." Daniel shook his head. "Rules made by a group do not erase rights written into law. This document was signed by the county itself many years ago. You came here thinking you could take my dock. But it seems you do not realize who really has authority over these waters." The breeze rustled the leaves, and the sound of the waves grew louder, as if the lake itself was waiting for the outcome. Clara's confident posture began to soften. She exchanged a quick glance with Paul, and both of them realized this visit was no longer about a single dock. Daniel folded his arms and looked at them calmly. "So, will you still demand that I remove my dock? Or will you admit you have stepped into something bigger than you understand?" The HOA team had no quick answer. Their plan had failed, and Daniel now stood as someone they could not easily challenge. The water glimmered behind him, shining like a shield. For the first time, the association realized they might not be the ones in control. And Daniel knew that this was only the beginning. The silence after Daniel's words lasted longer than anyone expected. The three members of the HOA stood on the porch, looking at one another as if they had stepped into a storm they did not plan for. Paul's hands gripped the folder tightly, Clara tapped her foot nervously, and the third man, whose name was Henry, looked as if he wanted to disappear. Daniel did not press them. He stood with steady patience, letting the weight of the old documents sink into their minds. He knew that once people saw the truth written on official paper, their arguments would not carry the same power. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "These papers may be old, but they cannot mean you control all the waterways. That would be impossible." Daniel shook his head slowly. "Not impossible. You should know that the county once needed someone to maintain the flow of rivers, keep trade routes open, and protect the bridges. They gave this responsibility to the owner of this land. It has passed down for more than 100 years. When I bought this property, I inherited that authority." Paul's face grew red. He wanted to argue, but he knew that if these papers were real, then the HOA's claim over the water had no strength. He cleared his throat and said, "We will need to review this with our board. We cannot make a decision today." Daniel gave a small nod. "Do what you must. But until then, my dock stays. And more than that, you should be careful. You may find that many of your rules mean nothing once the truth is known." The three members left in their SUV, leaving a cloud of dust behind. Daniel watched them drive away, then gathered the documents and placed them back in the folder. He knew the HOA would not give up easily. They had grown used to having control, and now their authority was shaken. Later that day, Daniel walked down to the dock. He untied his small wooden boat and rowed into the lake. The water reflected the clear sky, and the gentle sound of the oars calmed his mind. As he reached the center of the lake, he looked across the water. On the far side, there were other docks, small houses, and families enjoying the summer. Most of them did not know that the rights of these waters rested in his hands. He thought of the responsibility. It was not only about keeping a dock. If the documents were followed as written, he could decide who used the waterways, who built on them, and even who could fish or travel across them. It was more power than he ever asked for. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Daniel received visitors. Two neighbors, a couple named Tom and Myra, walked to his porch carrying a basket of bread. They had heard about the HOA visit, and curiosity had brought them. Tom spoke first. "We saw those association folks leaving in a hurry this morning. Looked like something serious. What happened?" Daniel invited them to sit and poured tea. He explained the encounter in simple words, showing them the old documents. Tom's eyes grew wide, and Myra leaned closer, almost whispering. "You mean," Myra said, "you have control over all the rivers and lakes in this county?" Daniel nodded. "That is what the papers say. I did not plan it, but it seems to be true." Tom whistled softly. No wonder the HOA looked worried. "If people learn about this, they will come to you for every matter connected to the water." Daniel sighed. "And that is the part that troubles me. I did not move here for power. I wanted peace. But I cannot hide from responsibility." The moment I showed them the documents, the world began to change. Myra placed a hand on the table. "Then you must be careful. Some will come with respect, but others will come with greed. Not everyone will like that one man holds such authority. Daniel knew she was right. Already he could imagine the HOA board gathering in some meeting room, trying to find a way to challenge him. They would not accept defeat quietly. That night, as Daniel prepared for bed, he heard the sound of an engine outside again. He looked through the window and saw headlights near the road. A different car, smaller, stopped for a moment, then drove away. It was as if someone was watching his cabin. The next morning, a letter arrived in his mailbox. It was stamped with the HOA seal. Daniel opened it carefully. Inside was a short message: "We require a full copy of the documents you presented yesterday. Deliver them to the HOA office by Friday. Failure to comply may result in legal action." Daniel read the letter twice, then placed it on the table. He knew this was only the beginning of their attempts to push back. They wanted the documents, not to honor them, but to find a weakness or a loophole they could use. Instead of feeling afraid, Daniel felt a strange calm. He realized something important. The HOA thought they were fighting for power over a dock and a lake. But the truth was larger. The control of the waterways was not just a matter of property. It was about history, law, and the hidden ties that bound the county together. Standing on his porch, Daniel looked out at the water once again. He whispered to himself, if they want a fight over these waters, then they will learn what it means to face the one who truly owns them. The sun rose higher, casting golden light over the lake. The calm surface seemed to promise storms ahead, but Daniel was ready. At the edge of town, inside a modern brick building, the HOA board gathered for an emergency meeting. The long table was filled with papers, laptops, and cups of coffee. The air was heavy with unease. Paul sat at the head, his jaw tight, while Clara and Henry took their seats nearby. Around them were other board members, each whispering with concern. Paul cleared his throat. "We have a problem," he said firmly. "A man named Daniel claims to own rights over the waterways of this county. He has documents to prove it." The room grew quiet. A woman named Ruth, one of the senior board members, leaned forward. "Claims? Or truth? You would not call this meeting unless you saw something serious." Clara placed the old copy of the deed on the table. The board members bent over it, reading quickly. The words were clear. The county, more than a century ago, had granted water rights to the owner of Daniel's property. The authority stretched across every stream and river that fed into the lake. "This cannot stand," Ruth said sharply. "If word spreads, no one will respect our authority. We will lose control." Another member, a man named Greg, frowned. "But if the document is legal, we cannot just ignore it. The courts will side with him. Perhaps we should negotiate." Paul slammed his hand on the table. "Negotiate? With him? He is one man. We are the association. We cannot bow to him. We must find a way to prove his claim invalid." Clara nodded quickly. "I agree. If we allow him to keep these rights, it will undo years of our work. Every dock, every fishing boat, every water permit, he could change all of it with a single decision." The board argued back and forth. Some wanted to fight, others wanted to talk. At last, Ruth raised her hand for silence. "We will form two paths," she said. "First, we will pressure him legally. Demand copies of his papers, search for weakness, find a way to challenge them in court. Second, we must control the story. No one outside this board must learn the truth. If the community finds out, they may start turning to him instead of us." The others agreed. The meeting closed with a plan to move fast. While the board plotted, Daniel's cabin remained quiet. He spent the next day working on his garden, fixing the small fence, and fishing at the dock. Yet his thoughts stayed heavy. He knew the HOA would not give up. He could almost feel their eyes watching him. That afternoon, Tom returned, this time with more neighbors. Myra was with him, and behind them were 3 other families from the nearby houses. They gathered on Daniel's porch with worried faces. One man, named Peter, spoke first. "Daniel, is it true? Do you control the water here?" Daniel did not answer quickly. He looked at their faces and saw both hope and fear. Finally, he brought out the folder again and showed them the deeds. He explained the history and how it had passed to him. The neighbors listened carefully. Some gasped in surprise, while others exchanged nervous glances. Myra spoke softly. "If this is true, then the HOA has no real power. For years, they have charged us fees, forced rules, and threatened fines. Maybe we never needed them." Peter frowned. "But if Daniel has this power, what does it mean for us? Will he charge us too? Will he make new rules?" Daniel raised his hand. "I am not the HOA. I am your neighbor. I never wanted control. But the truth is in these papers. Whether I like it or not, I must carry the responsibility. I promise you, I will not use it for greed. I will protect what belongs to all of us." His calm words settled some of their fears. Still, Peter remained cautious. "The HOA will fight you, Daniel. They will not let go of their control." Daniel nodded. "I know. And that is why I need you. If they try to twist the truth, I must not stand alone." The neighbors exchanged looks. Slowly, one by one, they nodded. Tom spoke for all of them. "You can count on us. We are tired of being pushed around. If the association comes after you, they will have to face us too." For the first time, Daniel felt he was not alone in this battle. The weight of the responsibility was still heavy, but now there were hands ready to help carry it. That night, as the sky filled with stars, Daniel sat on the dock again. He thought about the board, their plans, and the storm that was coming. The water was calm, yet he felt it was listening, waiting, as if it too knew that change was near. Miles away, in the HOA building, Paul stared out the window with narrowed eyes. He had already sent letters to the county office, demanding old records. He had also hired a lawyer to review Daniel's deeds. "We will break him," Paul muttered under his breath. "No man can stand against the board." But deep in his heart, even Paul felt a flicker of doubt. Something about Daniel's calm strength troubled him. The board had power, yes, but Daniel held something older, something rooted in the land and the water itself. The first clash was near. The morning began with a sharp knock on Daniel's door. He opened it to find 2 men in formal suits. They carried briefcases and wore the same stern expression that officials often carried when they came with orders. "Mr. Daniel," one of them said, "we represent the county office. We are here to inspect the property and review documents related to your claim over the waterways." Daniel stood quietly for a moment. He had expected the HOA to make their move soon, and now it had come. He stepped aside and allowed them in. The men sat at the small wooden table while Daniel placed the leather folder in front of them. They examined the papers carefully. Their eyes moved slowly over the words, and their hands traced the old signatures and seals. Finally, one of them leaned back and adjusted his glasses. "These documents are genuine," he said. "They are old, but the county seal is authentic. The rights described here were never removed or changed." The other man frowned. "It is unusual. One person having authority over all waterways is rare. But the law is clear. If the deeds were passed properly, then the rights remain in force." Daniel listened without speaking. He did not need to argue, the documents spoke for themselves. Later that afternoon, as the officials left, a group of cars arrived. The HOA board stepped out with sharp faces and firm steps. Paul led them, holding a thick folder under his arm. Clara followed, her eyes narrowed, and Ruth walked behind with her usual cold expression. Paul raised his voice. "Daniel, we demand an explanation. You have shown these papers to others, and now rumors are spreading. You are creating unrest in the community." Daniel faced them calmly. "I showed the truth. The unrest does not come from me. It comes from your refusal to accept it." Clara stepped forward. "The association has served this community for years. We maintain order, safety, and harmony. If people begin to look to you instead, everything will fall apart." Daniel shook his head. "Order does not come from forcing rules. True harmony comes from fairness. You built your power on fear of fines and threats. But the law is older than your board. These rights are not mine alone. They belong to this land and to the people who live by it." Paul slammed his folder onto the table. "Enough of this talk. We have lawyers ready. If you continue to defy us, we will take you to court. You will spend years fighting, and in the end, you will lose." Before Daniel could answer, voices came from the road. A group of neighbors were walking up the path. Tom, Myra, Peter, and others gathered around the porch. More families followed behind them. Word had spread quickly, and now the community was watching. Tom stepped forward. "If you want to fight Daniel, then you fight us too. We know his rights are real. We know the water belongs under his care, not under your fees and threats." Myra added firmly, "We will not stand by while you try to silence him. The truth has come out, and no lawyer will change it." The HOA members turned to face the crowd. For the first time, their confidence weakened. They had not expected so many neighbors to stand together. Ruth raised her hand, trying to calm the moment. "Please, everyone, you do not understand the danger. If control shifts to one man, even a good man, it will create division. It is safer with the board." But Peter shouted back, "Safer for you, not for us. You made rules to serve yourselves, not the people. We remember the fines, the threats, the endless demands. Daniel is not like you. He listens." The crowd murmured in agreement. Daniel stood tall and spoke clearly, so all could hear. "I do not want power. I want fairness. These waters will not be closed to anyone. They are open for families, for fishermen, for travelers. What I hold is not a weapon but a duty. If you cannot accept that, then you are the ones creating division." The board members were silent. Paul clenched his jaw, but he knew the crowd was against him. Fighting here, in front of witnesses, would only make the HOA look weaker. Finally, Ruth spoke coldly. "This is not over. You may think you have won, but the law is complex. We will return." With that, the board gathered their things and left, their steps quick and their faces tied with anger. The neighbors stayed, cheering softly and patting Daniel on the back. Tom grinned. "That was the first battle, my friend, and you won it. But they will come again, stronger next time." Daniel nodded slowly. He looked across the lake, the sunlight shining on its surface. Deep inside, he felt the truth of Tom's words. This was only the beginning. The HOA would not surrender quietly. They would strike again, perhaps in ways less direct. As evening fell, Daniel sat on the dock once more. The water rippled gently, reflecting the fading sky. He whispered to himself, "If the board thinks this fight will break me, they have forgotten something. The water does not bow to rules made in a room. The water answers only to the truth." The calm waves touched the dock as if agreeing with him. The days after the first clash were tense. The HOA board had left Daniel's property in silence, but their absence did not mean surrender. Everyone knew the board was planning something behind closed doors. Neighbors noticed changes quickly. Letters began arriving in mailboxes, each stamped with the HOA seal. The letters warned about unlawful claims and dangerous misinformation. They said that one man could not be trusted with such responsibility, and that the HOA was the only safe choice for the community. Some neighbors tore the letters apart without reading them. Others grew worried. Doubt began to slip through the streets and across the lake. People whispered at the store, at the gas station, and even by the water's edge. Daniel felt the shift. One afternoon, when he went to the market in town, he noticed people looking at him strangely. A woman he often greeted with a smile avoided his eyes. A man who once shook his hand stepped aside as if Daniel carried trouble with him. Back at his cabin, Tom came to visit. He carried frustration in his face. "The HOA is spreading lies," he said. "They are saying you plan to charge fees for fishing, that you will close the waters unless people pay you. None of it is true, but rumors move faster than truth." Daniel listened calmly. "I expected this. They cannot defeat the law, so they try to poison the minds of the people. But the water is not theirs to use as a weapon." Myra joined them, carrying fresh vegetables. She set them on the table and said, "The board is clever. They have influence with county officials, and they know how to twist words. But you are not alone, Daniel. We believe you. And there are more out there who will too, if you speak to them directly." That evening, Daniel decided to act. Instead of waiting for the HOA to spread more rumors, he invited the community to his dock. Word spread quickly, and by sunset, families gathered along the shore. Some came with curiosity, others with doubt, and many with quiet hope. Daniel stood on the dock, the lake behind him glowing with the last light of day. His voice carried across the water. "My friends," he began, "you have heard rumors about me. Some say I will close the waters. Some say I will demand fees. But I stand before you to tell the truth. These waters are open. They have always been open. The law gives me the right to guard them, but I will never use that right to harm you. My role is not to own the water, but to protect it for all who live here." The crowd listened closely. Parents held their children's hands, fishermen nodded quietly, and even the doubtful ones leaned forward. "I will not replace the HOA with new chains," Daniel continued. "I will not build walls or demand coins. What I promise is simple: the water remains free. No board, no paper, no threat will take that from you." When he finished, silence followed for a moment, then soft applause grew into cheers. The neighbors felt the weight of his words. Even those who doubted began to see his honesty. But the HOA was not idle. That same night, in the town hall, Paul and Clara met with the county commissioner. Papers were spread on the table, and their voices were low but sharp. "He is turning the people against us," Paul said. "We cannot let this stand. If the crowd supports him, our power is gone." The commissioner, a heavy man with tired eyes, leaned back in his chair. "The deeds are real. I cannot deny them. But I can slow him down. The county has processes, reviews, and approvals. We can tie him in red tape until he gives up." Clara smiled slightly. "Good. While you delay him, we will keep spreading doubt. Every rumor, every whisper, will make him weaker." The deal was struck. The next morning, Daniel received another letter, this time from the county office. It said his documents must be reviewed in detail, and until the review was complete, his authority over the waterways would be placed on hold. Tom read the letter aloud, his face burning with anger. This is their trick. They cannot erase the deeds, so they bury them in endless reviews. They hope you will give up. Daniel folded the letter neatly. Let them try. The water is not on hold. The lake flows, the rivers run, and the people see the truth. Paper cannot stop the current. That day, as Daniel walked along the shore, a stranger approached him. He was an older man with weathered skin and strong eyes. He introduced himself as Harold, a fisherman from a neighboring town. I heard about you, Harold said. The HOA thinks they control these waters, but fishermen like me know better. If you truly hold the rights, then you are the ally we have been waiting for. The board has pushed us around for too long. Daniel shook his hand. I seek no followers, only fairness. Harold smiled. Fairness is all we need. And if you stand against the board, you will find that fishermen stand with you. As Harold left, Daniel felt something shift. The struggle was no longer only about his dock or his neighbors. Word was spreading beyond the county. The truth was reaching people who had long suffered under the same rules. That night, Daniel sat on his dock once more. The stars shone above, and the water rippled quietly. He could feel the fight widening. The HOA had powerful friends, but so did the truth. And the water, steady and eternal, was on his side. The next morning, Daniel awoke to the sound of distant engines. He stepped outside and saw a convoy of vehicles approaching along the dirt road. It was unusual, and the air seemed heavier than before. The first car stopped near the cabin. Out stepped a man in a crisp uniform. He introduced himself as Officer Reynolds, from the County Enforcement Division. He carried papers and wore a serious expression. Mr. Daniel, Reynolds began, we have received complaints regarding your control over local waterways. We need to inspect your property and verify your documents. Daniel nodded calmly. I expected this. The papers are ready for review. Please come in. Reynolds and two assistants entered the cabin. Daniel handed over the leather folder, and the officer studied each document carefully. His eyes scanned the seals, signatures, and old handwriting. These are authentic, Reynolds said finally. The deeds give you authority. However, there are new rules and permits that the county has introduced over time. You may have legal rights, but implementation may require oversight. Daniel understood the meaning. The county could slow him down with bureaucracy, but they could not erase the authority in the documents. As the officers left, Daniel walked to his dock. The water stretched endlessly, calm yet full of quiet strength. He knew the HOA would escalate their plans. By noon, word had spread. More neighbors arrived, bringing families, boats, and small supplies. The lake was no longer just Daniel's backyard, it had become a gathering place for the community. People came from nearby towns after hearing the news of the HOA's threats. Tom and Myra worked quickly to organize the crowd. We will make sure everyone knows the truth, Tom said. We cannot let rumors control us. Daniel addressed the gathering. The water belongs to no board, no group, and no one who spreads lies. It belongs to the people who live near it, who travel on it, and who respect it. If anyone tries to take it unjustly, we will stand together. The crowd cheered. Their voices echoed across the lake. Daniel could see determination in their eyes. They were no longer afraid of the HOA. Meanwhile, in the town hall, the HOA board was busy. Paul, Clara, and Ruth convened with county officials and lawyers. They discussed ways to delay Daniel's authority and weaken his growing support. We cannot fight the law, Paul said angrily. But we can confuse the people. If we create doubt and push bureaucratic processes, we can regain control slowly. Ruth added, we also need allies outside the county. Local politicians, business owners, anyone who depends on water control. They will help us create pressure against him. Clara nodded. Yes. While he gains hearts, we gain influence. If the community sees conflicting reports, they will hesitate to support him. Back at the lake, Daniel noticed movement in the distance. Several small boats approached, carrying more supporters, fishermen, families, and even a few journalists curious about the story. Harold, the older fisherman, guided them toward the dock. People are starting to see, Harold said. They realize the board's control was never fair. They want truth, not rules made for selfish gain. Daniel smiled slightly. Then we keep moving forward. We cannot force anyone, but we can show them the facts. As evening approached, Daniel gathered the neighbors on the dock for a meeting. They discussed strategies to protect the waterways, inform the public, and respond to any legal challenges. Maps were spread on tables, ideas were exchanged, and plans were made. Tom spoke with determination. If they try to use the county to slow us, we must have evidence ready. Photos, documents, witnesses. We cannot be surprised again. Myra added, and we must show the truth to everyone. People are the strongest shield against lies. Daniel nodded. Exactly. The water is not only mine to protect. It belongs to all of us. And together, we are stronger than fear or false authority. As night fell, lights glimmered along the shore. Families camped near the dock, talking quietly but confidently. Daniel walked to the water's edge and looked across the lake. The reflection of the moon danced on the surface, making it seem as though the water itself was alive. He whispered to himself, "They can bring rules, lawyers, and officials. But they cannot control what is just. The truth flows freely, and so do we." Deep in the town hall, Paul and Clara were still plotting. They did not yet know that the tide had shifted. Daniel's influence was no longer just about his cabin or his dock, it was spreading across the county, gathering those who valued fairness over fear. The fight ahead would be harder than ever. The HOA had power and strategy. But Daniel had something stronger, the truth, the law, and the support of people who would not be intimidated. The lake remained calm, but Daniel knew it was only the beginning. Rising tides always bring change. And Daniel was ready to face whatever waves came next. The sun rose over the lake, casting golden light on the calm water. Daniel stood on his dock, looking at the horizon. Today felt different. He sensed that the final challenge from the HOA was near. He could feel the quiet strength of the water, steady and patient, as if it too was waiting for the moment to act. By mid-morning, a convoy of vehicles appeared at the entrance of Daniel's property. The HOA had returned, this time with lawyers, officers, and 2 county officials. Paul led the group, his face rigid with determination. Clara and Ruth followed, each carrying files and papers that looked like they could fill an office. "Daniel," Paul shouted as he approached the dock, "this ends today. We have court orders, permits, and legal documents demanding that you cease control over the waterways immediately. You must comply, or face consequences." Daniel stood tall. "I am aware of your papers, but the deeds I hold are older than your permits and court orders. They give me authority over these waters, and the law supports it." A lawyer from the HOA stepped forward. "You cannot simply ignore county procedures. We have authority to enforce the law." Daniel shook his head calmly. "Authority cannot erase history. The deeds were issued by the county itself. Any enforcement that contradicts them has no legal standing. I suggest you read them carefully before wasting time." The officers looked uneasy. They had studied the documents before, and they knew Daniel was correct. The HOA's strategy relied on bureaucracy, but the truth was stronger than paperwork. Then, something happened that surprised everyone. From the trees and along the shore, families, fishermen, and neighbors gathered. Boats floated near the dock, carrying people who had come to show support. Tom and Myra stood at the front, waving hands to signal unity. Harold, the fisherman from the neighboring town, called out greetings. Daniel raised his hand for silence. "These waters are not mine to control alone. They belong to the people who live by them, who respect them, and who depend on them. Today is not about a dock or a deed. It is about fairness, justice, and the truth." The crowd cheered. The sound echoed across the lake, reaching the ears of the HOA board and county officials. Their confident expressions began to falter. They had underestimated the strength of a community united. Paul stepped forward angrily. "This is unlawful. You cannot just gather people to defy orders. A neighbor shouted from the crowd, "We are not defying orders. We are supporting what is right. These waters have been free, and they will remain free." The murmurs grew louder, turning into a chorus of voices demanding recognition of Daniel's authority. Even the county officers hesitated. They could not enforce anything against the law, and the deeds were unbreakable. Clara tried to argue. The board has served this community for years. You cannot just ignore us. Daniel shook his head. Service built on fear is not service. These waters are not yours to manipulate. They belong to the people, and I will protect them. Seeing the strength of the community, Paul finally faltered. He realized that fighting now would only make the HOA look weak and self-serving. Ruth and Clara exchanged worried glances, understanding the truth had shifted the balance. A county official stepped forward, holding a tablet. The deeds are valid. We cannot contradict the law. The authority of Mr. Daniel is confirmed. Any attempts to interfere would be illegal. Paul's shoulders slumped. Then, what do we do? Daniel smiled calmly. You accept what is fair. You respect the truth. You leave the water and the people in peace. With that, the HOA team quietly withdrew, taking their papers and plans. The crowd erupted in cheers. Families hugged one another. Fishermen clapped Daniel on the back. The lake, calm and endless, reflected the celebration like a mirror. Tom turned to Daniel. You did it. The board cannot touch you now. And the people know the truth. Myra smiled. Yes, and they will help protect it. This lake, these rivers, and the waterways are safe. Daniel looked across the water. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also the relief of justice. He understood that power was not in domination, but in protection. The community had not only supported him, they had become part of the solution. That evening, the sun set with colors brighter than ever. Families remained near the shore, laughing and sharing stories. Children ran near the dock, tossing stones and watching ripples form. The air was filled with joy and calm, the lake alive with peace. Daniel sat quietly at the edge of the dock, dipping his hands into the cool water. He whispered softly, "This is how it should be. The water flows freely, and so must justice. I will protect it for all who call this home." Harold, standing beside him, nodded. You are more than a neighbor, Daniel. You are a guardian. The water chose well. From the shore, the community cheered once more, their voices carrying across the lake. The HOA's attempts had failed, and truth had won. As night fell, the stars reflected on the water like tiny lanterns. Daniel felt a sense of calm that he had never known. The fight was over, the waters were safe, and the people had learned the value of honesty and unity. The lake remained eternal, steady, and free. And Daniel, the quiet man who had once only wanted a peaceful life, now stood as its protector, knowing that fairness and truth would always flow stronger than fear or greed.